Today we're going to be working on the line plots section of Khan Academy. The very first section here, the subtopic that we're going to work on is graph data on line plots through 1/8 of a unit. Looking at these questions, it says, a family picked apples at an orchard. The table below shows how much each person picked to the nearest 1/4 of a bushel. So the first thing we want to look at, we want to make sure that we understand our data. So Saul picked 1 1/4 bushels. Adrian picked 1 3/4 bushels. Okay, and then etc. So then moving down, we need to create a line plot that shows this information. So we need to figure out where 1 1/4 is on this whole line right here. Well, we can do that a few different ways. One way I like to look at it is between 0 and 1. Okay, I count the hashtags. So there's 1, 2, 3 hashtags, which means there's 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. So if there's 4 spaces, that means each hashtag is really 1/4. 1 out of 4. This would be 2 out of 4, and we should know that 2/4 is the same as 1/2. And this would be 3 out of 4. And this would be 4 out of 4, which is the same as 1. So now I know that each hashtag counts as 1/4. That should help me. So 1 1/4 is going to be right here. So there is Saul's dot. Adrian's dot is going to be at 1 3/4. Well, here's 1, 1 1/4, 1 2/4, 1 3/4. So there's Adrian's dot. Bowden is going to be at 3/4. So we can't start at 1, we've got to start at 0. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. So there's Bowden. And then Liz is at 3/4 also, so I can just make another dot there. And Nyla is at 1 3/4. So 1 and then 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. So the biggest challenge here is figuring out what each of those hash marks means on the number line itself. The next question says, a produce stand is selling baskets of peaches. The table below shows the different weights of each basket. Measurements are rounded to the nearest 1/8 of a pound. So again, let's make sure we understand our information. So there's one basket that weighs 5 pounds. There's 3 baskets that weigh 4 1/8 pounds. There's 4 baskets that weigh 4 3/4 pounds. 4 baskets that weigh 4 1/2 pounds, and 2 baskets that weigh 4 3/8 pounds. If I go down to my number line down here, now again, I need to make sure I understand what each of these mean. So I'm going to look between my 2 whole numbers. So here's my whole number 4, and here's my whole number 5. I'm counting the spaces. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces. That means each little hashtag here, or hash mark, means 1/8. So this is 1/8. This would be 2/8, but if we simplified 2/8, it would be 1/4. So it's really the same. 3/8, 4/8, and 4/8 is 1/2. So that makes sense. Now we can go ahead and put our numbers or our dots on the number line. So 5 pounds, there's 1 basket. 4 1/8. Well, 4 1/8. I've got to have 3 dots. And then 4 3/4. I need 4 dots. 4 1/2. I need 4 dots. And 4 3/8. So 4 1/8, 2/8, 3/8. And I need 2 dots there. Okay, so that is my completed number line. The owner of a produce stand is selling bunches of grapes, priced by the pound. The table below shows the weights of several bunches of grapes rounded to the nearest 1/8 of a pound. Okay, so we're going to make sure we understand bunch 1 weighs 5/8 of a pound. Bunch 2 weighs 1 7/8 of a pound. Bunch 3 weighs 1 5/8 of a pound. So I'm making sure that I understand what my data even says. Then I'm going to go down and look at my number line. It wants me to create that line plot. So first thing I need to do is figure out what all of these dashes even mean. Okay, so here's my 0 and here's my 1. You can go in between any two whole numbers. Okay, so I'm going to count my spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That means it's broken up into eighths. That means each hash mark here means 1/8. So for bunch 1 is at 5/8. So 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8. And I need to put a dot. 1 and 7/8. So that's going to be 1 and then 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8. So 1 and 7/8 is going to be right here. Bunch 3 at 1 and 5/8. So here's 1 and then 5/8. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, and put a dot. Bunch 4 is at 6/8. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8. And then lucky for us, bunch 5 is also at 6/8, so we can just add another dot right on top of that one. The table below gives the heights of the saplings that Ms. Valendra's science class planted. The measurements are rounded to the nearest 1/4 of an inch. So we have 2 saplings that are 8 1/4 inches. We have 3 that are 8 3/4 inches. We have 5 that are 8 1/2 inches, and so on. Then I scroll down to look at my line plot. Okay, the very first thing that I need to do is figure out what in the world each of these lines even means. So I'm going to look between my two whole numbers, 8 and 9, and I'm going to count the spaces in between 8 and 9. So there's 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, 4 spaces. That means it's split up into fourths. So each hash mark here is 1/4. So 8 1/4, 8 1/4, and I need 2 dots there because of my 2 up here. 8 3/4 is going to be 8, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. 1, 2, 3. 8 1/2, we need 5. 7 1/2, we need 4. 9, we need 1. And 7 3/4. So 7 1/2 is really like 7 2/4. They mean the same thing. So 7 3/4 is going to be right next door, and we're going to put 2 dots there. And that is our line plot. And then this shows that we got all 4 questions right here, so we are now proficient in this topic.